Okay, welcome everyone to the Irvington Historical Society presentation of Inside Villa Lewaro, which is a conversation with Ambassador Harold Doley. Before I get into that, let me introduce first myself. I'm Barrett Seaman. I'm a member of the board of the Historical Society. And with me behind the screens is my colleague Chet Kerr, who will be operating the PowerPoint presentation. And before I get to introduce Ambassador Doley, I'm just going to talk a little bit about Villa Lewaro and Madam Walker. I suspect that many, if not most of you, are familiar with the achievements of Madam C.J. Walker, who built Villa Lewaro in 1918 at the height of her business career and as the founder of a company that manufactured and marketed hair care products for African-American women. She was born Sarah Breedlove in rural Louisiana. She was orphaned early. She worked as a washerwoman. She was married 3 times, bearing a daughter from her first marriage and adopting the last name, name of her last, who was one Charles J. Walker. Now, Ambassador Doley, who is our principal guest here today, has had a highly successful career in finance. He's a native of New Orleans, graduated from the Xavier University and Harvard Business School. He is the only African-American to have owned a seat on the New York Stock Exchange. He's been an active Republican. He was named ambassador to the African Development Bank based in the Ivory Coast by Ronald Reagan in 1983. In his public life, he has been a strong supporter of education, in particular the nation's historically Black colleges and universities. But for our purposes today, the most important thing about Harold and his wife, Helena, is that they owned and occupied Villa Lewaro for 25 years. During those years, Ambassador Doley became, in effect, a student of Madam Walker and the house that she built more than a century ago. So welcome, Ambassador. Let me start by asking, what led you to buy this house in the first place? I can almost hear Mrs. Doley saying, "What were you thinking?"
It's the only home I've ever wanted to own. The significance of the home, the history is something that I've appreciated for decades. There is, in my estimation, no other home with an African-American history that is as significant as the Madam C.J. Walker estate. Mm-hmm. Others may say Madam Coin, who was also from Louisiana, and her property was also designated as a National Historic Landmark property early on, but that did not deal with the actual pictures that we know of the Melrose plantation. That was actually the Herzog family's photo of that property. They purchased the Herzogs purchased the property from the Matwire family, Madam Coin's family. So this home fascinated me. In 1968, I was in training on Wall Street. And one day I got on the train and rode out just to see the villa. Walked around, did not ring the bell or anything. And then I went back to the city. And I said to myself, one day I am going to own that home.
Now, as I recall, I think it was in the New York Times that when Your wife first walked inside into the house. She burst into tears. Is that a true story?
My wife is very insightful. Uh, she knew and understood far better than I that there was a tremendous amount of work that was required. And I pretty much walked in with rose-colored glasses on. You know, I want this, and I will do what's necessary to bring this old estate back to the days of Madam.
Right. Well, let's take a little photographic tour of the house, some of the rooms here, and you can make some comments on these photos as they appear. This is the music room. Is that correct?
That's correct. And this is the way it looked when we sold it in 3 years ago. And the interesting thing is that many of the furnishings were purchased by the new owner. So the house, to an extent, looks very much like it did when we left 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Let's move to the next slide because this is one of the unique characteristics of the house. An organ. Could you talk a little bit about that organ, which was original?
Yes, and built into the house. It's an Este organ. The Este Organ Company was based in Brattleboro, Vermont. And when we saw some of the history of the transaction between Madam and the Este Organ Company, which was interesting. The historian of the Este Organ Company, his daughter actually lived in Irvington. Talk about a small world. And he called me one Christmas morning, and I said, "Come on over." He introduced me to the last living craftsman of the Este Organ Company. And I had this guy to come and spend a week evaluating the organ to see what needed to be done to make it operative again. And after a week, he told me the cost to fix the organ would be anywhere, and this is 1990, actually early 1994 dollars, anywhere from $35,000 to $150,000. But with that, he could not guarantee that it would work. And I didn't think those were good odds. And he further told me that the history of the organ was that it always had problems. So I understand the new owner said he wants to restore the organ, which would be really tremendous.
And tremendously expensive.
It will be expensive. I think the Presbyterian Church down the street on Broadway redid their organ, and the cost was over $1 million. That just comes to mind. these are not um, uh, endeavors that are inexpensive.
Right. Now, this photo on the right, the sort of grill that we're looking at, what's its relationship to the organ?
Well, behind the grill, you have the windpipes um, for the organ. The organ, when you say that the organ is a part of the house, that is not overstating it. I mean, there are rooms in the basement dedicated just to dealing with the organs, with the organ, such as the machine that powered the flow of the windpipes.
Put the
And
air into the pipes, right?
pardon me?
Put the air into the pipes.
Yes. And then there were other areas that dealt with actually the getting the right notes and sounds. And the craftsmanship on this just seemed just extraordinary. And beyond the organ, we over the years had several string quartets, the Harlem string quartet performed, as well as the Harlem Renaissance Band. And I can tell you that the acoustics in this room, the music room, is extraordinary. And the music room is one of the more beautiful rooms of the house.
Right.
But it serves a multiplicity of purposes.
Sure. Well, let's move to the next slide because you talk about the detail of the house. And I believe this next picture is going to show the fireplace in the foyer. You look at the appointments of that fireplace mantle, it's pretty extraordinary.
I mean, you can every day go in and inspect very minute aspects of the home.
Mhm.
And if the fireplace is one that, you know, you say it's a fireplace, granted, but the artistry in that fireplace is very impressive. And it is, I mean, when you look at the craftsmanship and the architect of the villa was Vertner Tandy. He was an African-American architect. He was first trained at Tuskegee and then went on to Cornell. And he and his business partner, a fellow architect of his, were the first and second African-Americans to be licensed in the state of New York. And he was more than an architect. He was a master builder here. He was involved in every aspect of the building of this home.
Let's move to the next slide, Chet, because I think we have the master staircase, which is quite a piece of art in itself. And I think there's a little bit of a story to this, maybe related to the movie that was later done about Madam Walker. Did this staircase play a role there? or
Yes, well, the movie, which I don't think really um, reflects who Madam Walker was and what she means to us as a historical figure. But one thing about this staircase here is, and the movie was made in Canada. I understand it's less expensive to do movies in Canada. There is a scene where you see that same effect of the circular painting, and that's really what it is. It goes up the stairwell there, but you can see that a similar sort of effect in the movie.
we can talk a little bit more about the movie later, but let's move on to the next slide because this is the butler's pantry, as you can see. But tell us about one aspect of this that you think is pretty extraordinary.
Well, at the bottom left there is a real icebox. And with that, we said, look, if we've got an icebox, we're going to use it. And it was made into a refrigerator to assist with dining in the dining room, which is right next door. The sink there, I've seen a sink similar at Kikett. The actual butler's pantry is very small, and to the right you can't see it, but you have the dumbwaiter down to the kitchen, and above that is what I call an annunciator. That's what we used to call it on the floor of the stock exchange, where it calls out if someone is staff is wanted or needed in a particular area, that annunciator would notify them.
Right. We saw that a lot on the British series Upstairs, Downstairs with annunciators there.
Yeah.
Chad, if you could move to the next slide, which is the master bedroom. Did you and Mrs. Doley use this?
Yes, we did. And my wife never did like the Rococo aspect of this bed. But I saw it, bought it, and I thought she would be happy. And this room is actually the room that Madam died in. She stayed in the room for several days and went over her will and sending and preparing notes for various people. She knew she was dying. And in front of the bed there is an up and down television, internet screen.
Not an original piece.
No.
Okay, Chet, could you move to the next screen here? This anybody that I have talked to who's taken a tour of this house remembers this especially. Could you talk about this needle shower?
And the needle shower works. It's and I used it all the time, and it's a wonderful way to take a shower. Get the water coming at you from all angles and overhead. Mentioning Kaiket, there is a needle shower I saw also at Kaiket.
Really? Same vintage. Chet, could we move to the last of these inside photographs, the third floor? This is the billiard room on the third floor.
Yes.
And that's a skylight there. This seems to be a pretty extraordinary thing to have in a house at that vintage.
Well, not only is it a skylight, but the stained glass of that skylight is Tiffany glass, which they have several Tiffany stained glass windows, and just, I guess they're mostly windows in the house.
Right. Well, let's Chet, move to the next slide, which is going to introduce the Annie E. Poth home, which was what Villa Lewaro was for half a century, if I'm not mistaken. And you did not purchase the house directly from Annie Poth, but they were the most immediate occupant of the house anyway. Is that right?
Well, there had been an owner, an intervening owner after the Annie Potts group, the daughters of the companions of the forest. They had various names, but Annie Potts, well, first of all, the villa was left to the NAACP.
Right.
And on the same day that the NAACP took possession, they sold the villa to Annie Potts, Annie Pot individually. And in a short period of time, she did the paperwork to put it into her organization's name. But you mentioned 50 years, and I want to give them credit for not damaging the villa intentionally, but the neglect was really unfortunate in terms of the plumbing and electrical and other mechanical equipment.
But at the same time that they neglected that, Chad, if you can move to the next slide, I think we have examples of some things that they contributed to the house. Is that right?
Yes, yes. We call this from the chapel, and it's a room dedicated to individuals in the organization of the Companions of the Forest. And some of these windows are stained glass, some of them are painted glass. But it's unusual to have such a room like this in a private home.
Right. Chet, move to the next slide. I think we'd see a detail here. This is a panel dedicated to her recording secretary, which just seems an unusual thing to do, but they took care of themselves, I guess.
Yeah.
The Companions of the Forest, the house was basically used as a home for the indigent and disabled. Is that correct?
Not indigent, but it was the widows of woodsmen that were a part of that industry. And the codicil of the antipots will and the mission under which it operated stated that the villa would remain operational as long as there was a surviving member. And there was, I understand, one lady that lived basically in the house by herself. And she was quite elderly. And after she passed, there was an effort to sell the villa.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's when you and a fellow from Irvington kind of got into a competition to buy the house.
And I was bottom fishing, and he went in and he got it, and we began discussions almost immediately. I let him know I wanted to buy it, and I intended to buy it, and he saw this as now this is my interpretation, he saw it as something he could flip, but the villa is nothing you can flip, a real estate flip. And he was in constant dialogue with organizations and committees that said they wanted to buy the property from him. And I told him, I said, look, man, there's never been a statue erected honoring a committee. Yeah, committees can't get things done. And eventually we, after a couple of years, came to an agreement, and I bought the villa. His wife was a psychiatrist, and she said both of us were legally insane. And she said we'd never do a deal, but we did.
Okay, let's move to the next slide, Chet. This is Layla Walker. This opens up a whole door into the Walker family before the NAACP and before the Antipoth organization. This is the real nuts and bolts of the history of the house here. Tell us a little bit about Layla Walker. This picture was taken in 1926. Very dramatic, fairly glamorous looking woman here.
She is, and she was a tall lady. And I understand she liked to wear high heel shoes, which made her even more imposing. Mm-hmm. But she was an only child, a spoiled child. But she had good ideas. She had good instincts, and we celebrate Madam Walker today, and we will for really into perpetuity because of many of the ideas that Lelia Walker promoted. I mean, Madam owned property in various places. She had owned property in Pittsburgh, and we'll see it in a minute or two, a photo of Madam in Indianapolis, where she located her manufacturing plant. Right. But Alelia said, Mama, we've got to go to Harlem. And the same architect that did the villa was retained before he did the villa to do a townhouse for them on 135th Street in Harlem, which is now, it was raised in the late 30s, maybe even into 1940. And it's on the footprint of the Schomburg Center for Research, which is part of the New York Public Library.
Before we get to that, and that's a fascinating piece of this, Chet, you could move to the next slide, a little bit more about Layla Walker's personal life and this person pictured here, Fairy Mae Bryant. Can you talk about that relationship?
Well, Alelia was married like a mother 3 times. She did not have any biological children. And Fairy Mae Bryant, her family lived right across from the Madam C.J. Walker manufacturing plant. And Lelia took a liking to Fairy Mae Bryant. She was used in promotional material by the company. And with her long braided hair, she made a great model.
Right. Okay, let's move to the next slide we have, which is the arranged marriage, as it described, of Fairy Mae Walker to Gordon Walker at the villa. Tell us how this all came about.
This was an arranged marriage, and Madam was married 3 times, as I said, and Alelia was married 3 times. So they knew about putting on a wedding. And Mary Faye, they found this bon vivant guy, and there was this almost a contract marriage. It didn't last. There were reports that one of the marriages, the invitations were sent out, and the groom backed out, said, "I'm not getting married." Alelia said, "Fine. The invitation's out. We're going to do the wedding. We'll just substitute the groom." And they did. But it was a extravagant wedding. It made the black papers all across the country, as well as it was written up in the New York Times. And the next photo shows 2 of the bridesmaids and Freeman Ransom's daughter, who was the flower girl.
And Freeman Ransom was the attorney for Madam Walker and for Layla, and really in many ways kind of the man who ran the show for a long time. Is that right?
He was the business manager, yes. And Madam put a lot of trust, as well as Lelia. in Freeman Ransom, and he remained involved with the company until his death. And his daughter, as shown here in the picture, at one point was the president of the Madam C.J. Walker Company.
Oh, wow. Okay. Jed, you want to move to the next? We're going to go back to Harlem again. Here is the building you spoke of earlier called the Dark Tower. This was, you mentioned before that Layla wanted to be part of, wanted to be in Harlem. It was an important place for the company and for her personally to be. What did she do there?
Well, the Harlem Renaissance, as we know it, to a very large extent, was underwritten and promulgated by Lelia Walker. All of the great and grands would attend the Dark Tower, the poets, the actors, the singers, the musicians. They frequented the tower, and that automobile gives you an idea of the year that this picture was taken.
And the lifestyle, right?
And the lifestyle. I mean, and we'll get into it, but Madam was an extraordinary philanthropist. And it was good for business.
Right.
In capitalism, you don't need to steal. You can make so much money just operating a business. And Madam Walker, using marketing techniques that she created, was very successful as a philanthropist and as an entrepreneur.
Right. Chet, you want to move to the next slide? A picture of Langston Hughes, who was, of course, a famous poet. He was part of Layla's entourage. Is that right?
That is correct. And he came along after Madam had passed. I actually have one of Langston Hughes's poems, excuse me, on my desk. He visited the villa often, and Miss says that he was inebriated at one time, one of the times he was at the villa, and he wrote a poem on the wall. Now, others dispute that. The room this allegedly occurred is what we called the Blue Nile room. It's a room with the color of the Nile, the so-called Blue Nile, and there is it's full of Egyptian drawings, this was an idea that we had for this particular room, which is a room that separates the master bedroom, which was Madam's room, from Alelia's room. You had the bathroom, the individual bathrooms for those bedrooms, and this separate room.
Mm-hmm. That's where we are. Could we move to the next slide, please? There is Amelia in the villa, looking pretty relaxed.
Yeah, well, she lived the good life. Well, excessive to an excess, unfortunately. And she, like her mother, died young. Madam died at age 51. And Lelia, at this point, she was called Lelia, died at age 46. She knew that the business was in decline, and it was the economic conditions of the day, as opposed to any failure on the operations of the Madam C.J. Walker Manufacturing Company. And she continued her lifestyle. She attended events really all over the world. When she went to Ethiopia, she met with Haile Selassie's wife. She met with other heads of state in different parts of the world. CB, is it CB? Trying to think, the former president of Liberia actually stayed at the villa. He was, Liberia was offered $5 million for its overall military protection during World War II and World War I, rather. And the Liberian said, U.S., you keep the money, you need it, and fight the war. And, you know, I always learned if there's money on the table offered to you, you take it. And they did not take it. And as a result, they never got that $5 million. C.B. King, that was the president's name. He was quite a guy, from what I've read.
You spoke earlier about the company in decline in that period in the 1920s. Let's go to the next slide, because this is a photograph of all of the agents that Madam Walker employed to sell her products. This was the structure of the company. Can you talk a little bit about that? And it's a structure that is used today.
Yeah, well, when Madam died, it is said that she had 20,000 agents that worked for her. And in 1917, there was the first meeting of the agents. And this event here in 1924 just shows you the kind of turnout that they would have for these events. This is the back of the villa. The pond you see there, or pool, it's according to the architectural plans, this is a reflecting pond. And right behind this was beautiful lattice work at the end of the stone wall, which if you ever want to see something in a modern day context, in building a great structure, the wall surrounding the villa is extraordinary. And I asked one of the guys that was a brick mason who was working on the house, how much would it cost to do a wall like that today? And this was 20-some years ago. He said probably $600,000. But the madam wanted the villa to be used by her agents, and for them to gravitate to it, for them to feel a part of it, and they did. She bought her property in Irvington, which was, at the time when she bought it, the richest community on a per capita basis in the country. And that's an undisputed fact. And she wanted it on Broadway. She wanted it seen, it's not behind trees or shrubs. It's on the on Villa and to be seen and appreciated. She wanted people to know what could be done with sheer determination, because that is what this woman had. And she built a company and was as successful as is attributed to her in less than 10 years. She became the wealthiest self-made female in the country in less than 10 years. And at the same time, she was an outstanding philanthropist. She was the largest contributor to the NAACP. She contributed to Marcus Garvey's association. She kept many of the Black newspapers alive with her advertisement.
Let's move to the next picture here, Chad. It's an example of advertising that she ran. She was a marketer at heart, and ran her business that way.
She really did. And everything related to her business. Her leading agent was A. Philip Randolph's wife. A. Philip Randolph was putting together, and he was head of the sleeping car porters union. Right. And she kept him alive, the union alive, and Philip Randolph's wife, A. Philip Randolph's wife, as the leading agent, she also was involved in the newspaper, a newspaper that Madam kept going, and that was the basis of building the sleeping car porters union.
Right.
But when you look at it, and Madam having her manufacturing plant in Indianapolis, it was there for a reason. And we'll get to that in just a moment.
I was just going to suggest, Chet, if you move to the next photograph, we can start to discuss here the intersection between Madam Walker's business acumen and her business success and her involvement in civil rights at the time. So talk a little bit about this photograph and the people who were in it.
This is taken at the YMCA in Indianapolis. And the National Negro Business League, which was founded by Booker T. Washington, was having its annual meeting there. And Madam, through sheer determination, was recognized by Booker T. Washington, who had tried to ignore her and did not want to give her credit for her success. But Madam, being the shrewd woman that she was, she kept up her demand to be heard. And over time, she was asked to be the keynote speaker for the National Negro Business League. Now, in this picture, to Madam's right is George Knox Sr. He owned a newspaper in Indianapolis. And I knew Mr. Knox's son and his grandchildren. Long stories there. But he convinced Madam, put your manufacturing company in Indianapolis. You can put your products on a train, and in less than 3 days, it can be anywhere in the country. And that's how she developed her national distribution network by being based in Indianapolis. But Madam just didn't play one tune. She also, because of her work with the sleeping car porters, these men being on these trains were given newspapers, Black newspapers with Madam Walker's ads. And these papers were distributed all over the country using the porters. I just think that kind of coordinated thinking is needed in a lot of businesses today. And behind Madam is Freeman Ransom, her attorney.
Right. Let's move to the next slide, Chet. Here's a huge figure in civil rights movement of the time, and kind of a socio, or at least ideological opposite of Booker T. Washington. Is that right? He was a socialist, and Booker T. Washington was more of a up by the bootstraps kind of guy. What was her relationship with DuBois?
And I mean, I don't think they agreed on much, if anything. Booker T had a gradual approach to the development of the Black race and its progress. He gave a speech at the called the Atlanta Exposition speech, when he spoke about, in effect, a segregated world, and cash your buckets where you are, and be happy with your station in life. But both men serve true purposes. Booker T dealt with very fundamental things in teaching people, how to make beds, how to brush their teeth, how to work with their hands. That was always a part of his educational philosophy, and it permeated throughout Black education. It wasn't just Tuskegee. All of the historically Black colleges, as we know them today, followed Booker T's philosophy. On the other hand, W.E.B. DuBois had a PhD from Harvard. He was highly intelligent, highly motivated. And he did things that were just extraordinary. He went to Versailles during the peace discussions of World War I, so that Black folks from around the world would have representation. That I think was extraordinary. And his book, The Soul of Black Folks, is almost diametrically opposite of Booker T. Washington's Up From Slavery. But the hook with Du Bois and Madam was the largest contributor to the NAACP, which Du Bois founded. I'm proud to say that Du Bois's son, David Graham Du Bois, visited and dined at the Villa on several occasions during our time at the Villa.
Okay, let's move to the next slide. We have one of Ida Wells, a famous journalist, a social activist, a feminist. What was her relationship with Madam?
Well, she as well was one of the founders of the NAACP, which was an outgrowth of the Niagara movement. Ida B. Wells was a lady from Mississippi. She attended Black College in Mississippi, and she was fiercely pro civil rights, and she took a lot of lumps, and you could go into so many things that she did, but she used the power of the pen. And Madam appreciated that and was a supporter of Ida B. Wells.
Let's move to the next one, Chet. We have Philip Randolph, and with him, Louise Campbell Green, who you referred to earlier, but talk a little bit more about the relationship of those two and Madam Walker. She was one of the agents that you mentioned before.
She was the leading agent, and she was involved as well with the newspaper of A. Philip Randolph. And Madam needed A. Philip Randolph to actually be one of her advocates and one of her distributors, as I said, putting those papers, the black newspapers, on the trains in Indianapolis was just a brilliant idea. I mean, the newspaper that A. Philip Randolph championed and owned and published, it was basically a failure, other than for the advertisements of Madam Walker.
She kept him afloat.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to the next slide, Chet. These are two very important people. The title here refers to the 1919 Conference of International League of Darker Peoples, which was held at Villa Lewaro. Who were these men and what was their relationship?
On the left is Adam Clayton Powell, Sr. He was the pastor at Abyssinia Baptist Church in Harlem. And he was a true activist. His son, Adam Clayton Powell Jr., the congressman, took a great deal from his father in terms of his activism. His father used to think his son went too far, but you could only sit back and admire Adam Clayton Powell Jr. To the right is Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey was from Jamaica originally, and created a movement with a self-help movement nationwide. And a lot of the so-called leadership at the time, they may have even had and agreed on similar philosophies, but they really did not coordinate their efforts. And Marcus Garvey was out there by himself. His organization was also funded by Madam Walker. Madam's attorney, Freeman Ransom, was very concerned with Madam's so-called radical involvement with some of these so-called fringe groups. But these organizations had a lot of members, and their leaders had tremendous followings.
Okay, let's flip the chart here, Chet, if you would. This is just the headline of a New York Times story in 1917 as Madam Walker was building Villa Lewaro. And what we haven't talked about to this point is what the relationship was between Madam Walker and the rest of Irvington that she moved into for just that year. This article gives us a little bit of a sense of that. Can you talk about that?
Well, the purchase of the land, and originally it was 7 acres. Madam, it said, paid a multiple of the value of the property, but she was determined to have it. It was said that this lady, this colored lady, going to the construction site must have been the maid of the new owners of this building. Madam did not allow slights or indignities, just like she did with the most powerful man, African American in America, Booker T. Washington. She held her ground and forged ahead. She may not have been invited over for tea in Irvington, but the way that she lived, the way that she adorned the house was something to admire and emulate. You may say a lot of things about not wanting to live next door to a Negro woman, but you could not give reasons that were negative about her lifestyle, and the way that she appointed the house. She had the finest of everything in that home. And those that did not come over for tea at Madam Walker's Villa Lewaro, they stood in line to try to buy some of her wares when Alelia passed.
Wow, interesting. Let's go to the next. This is an unusual slide that bears some explanation. A 350-year-old American beech tree. You can talk specifically about this tree, Ambassador, but also trees in general played a pretty significant role in Villa Lewaro's long history. Could you sort of talk about that, the role that the trees played?
Well, this tree is, it took a lot out of me in that I was determined that this tree would live. And I was told constantly by professionals, the tree is dying and it will be dead in so many years. What happened was that when the telephone company ran an underground wire, they ran it across the root system of this tree. And nothing we could do could save the tree, unfortunately. But in the front of the house, there were 3 trees whose lives total over a millennium. And there was an effort some years ago to buy the villa and make it condominiums. And the Arbor Society, the Arbor group of Irvington would not allow them to cut down these trees, period. One is a very famous ginkgo tree. Rumor has it, in the movie, they show that John D. Rockefeller was meandering in his yard and met Madam Walker, who was meandering in her yard. Which is, just pure Hollywood.
It's a pretty large meander to get from Kykwit to Villa Lewaro.
Absolutely. But it is a persistent rumor, tale that Rockefeller Jr. Did come to the property because he wanted to see the ginkgo tree on the property there in front. And Kykwit has several ginkgos now. But to think that what saved one of the great homes of America was just the unwillingness of the Arbor groups are called tree huggers.
The tree commission, tree huggers, right?
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that.
Well, perhaps more important than the Irvington Tree Commission was something you worked very hard at before you sold the house, which was to put an easement on the property that protects it in perpetuity. Talk a little bit about how that came about and why it was so important to you.
Well, when you put 25 years into something, you'd like for it to be around for a while. And in restoring the villa, I felt it was incumbent upon us, my family, to protect the villa with an easement. We entered into an easement arrangement with the National Trust for Historic Preservation. We funded the easement into perpetuity. It's irrevocable, and it's registered as a part of the deed of the estate with the clerk of courts in White Plains. And so as you see the villa today, many years in the future, it will continue to be the same as it was when Madam and her architects worked on this great home.
Right. It also made it a lot harder to sell, I would imagine, but you did manage to sell the villa. And can you talk a little bit about what you know about Richelieu Dennis, who bought the home, and what his plans are for it?
Not only does it make it more difficult to sell with an easement, Michael Douglas just bought, maybe a year or so ago, 2 years ago, a house 2 doors down from the villa. And the man that owned that, the home that Michael Douglas bought, put an easement on that property. And he, and I don't really like to go into dollar amounts, but certain things are impactful. Yabalon was his name. He wanted $14 million for the property. And let me tell you, if you've ever seen the property, been in the property, it was worth $14 million. But he put that easement on, and it decimated the value of the property. Michael Douglas bought that estate for $4.5 million, which was comparable to the Louisiana purchase to me. But not only did it put a ceiling on the villa by having an easement, but it also made it, I guess, almost obligatory that I find a unique buyer. And I did find a unique buyer in that Richelieu Dennis had purchased the Madam C.J. Walker company that was still based in Indianapolis. The company had been sold once before in the mid 80s. And it was sold to the two brothers, trying to think of their name. It'll come to me. But they paid $100,000 in effect for the name. It was not really a going concern with viability. And he died, the lead partner died, and his family took it over. He paid $100,000 for it. And his family sold that basically name to Richelieu Dennis or one of his companies.
And his companies were in essentially the same business of hair care products and other toiletries. So
yes,
it's a natural.
Yeah, and so the company, Richelieu Dennis's company, was sold several years ago to Unilever with Bain Capital acting as advisor and agents. that was probably a good deal for all concerned.
Chet, you want to flip to the last slide because it's, oh no, excuse me. No, well, let's go to the last slide. The village of Irvington recently had its second celebration of Juneteenth. First one being last year. It was said at the time that this was the first Juneteenth in the village of Irvington, but you and I know that that's not true. And we have in front of us your invitation in 2015 for a Juneteenth celebration, the sesquicentennial, but that wasn't the first that you had, correct?
Well, Barrett, you wrote over the years several articles regarding the Juneteenth event, where we held Juneteenth events every year. My mother was from Texas. Juneteenth was an event celebrated annually, a state holiday in the state of Texas. So this is something that I grew up with, and it was just a part of living in the villa, that this is maybe something also the villa should be remembered for having Juneteenth events when very few people even knew what Juneteenth was. And now I understand Irvington is going to have an annual event or upcoming event for this next Juneteenth.
And it's a national holiday now.
That's right.
Right. Well, Ambassador Doley, this has been fascinating. I think we could go on for a while, but I think we've overrun our time to a certain extent. And I suspect, Chet, if you want to reappear, come out from behind. We may have some questions from our audience. You're on mute, Chet.
If people want to have any questions, they can put them in the chat. You should do so, and I can help orchestrate them. There is a question, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, Harold, or not, but is there anything that someone writes, is there anything I can do to help at Villa Lewaro? And I don't know whether you know what's going on at Villa Lewaro today or not. I'm not sure that there's a real opportunity to help at Villa Lewaro as it currently stands, but what do you know anything about that right now?
Well, I think a lot can be done to help. And help comes in many forms. There's an effort that's been underway in Irvington for many years now to make Main Street, a viable destination. I think the use of the villa as an attraction, and look, I lived in the villa for 25 years. I know the issues of parking in Irvington and working with your neighbors on parking. And we learn to deal with that. You have two churches with very large parking lots, and we would use those parking lots, and we would give donations to the church. Parking lots basically not used frequently. But I think Howard Czar down at Lyndhurst it has a marketing mind like Madam Walker. He never stops thinking of ways to promote Lyndhurst. And we had talked about working with Lyndhurst and the villa to, without disruption to the local community, neighbors, to make it a real destination. He wanted to use his gift shop and sell items from the villa and have people that would visit both structures and not be imposing on anyone. But I think you go to Irvington. Irvington is a beautiful community. You know, you have that state park there that is, look, my wife and I, at least 3 to 4 times a week, drive across the county to get to that park to just sit out there. We love to bring our grandchildren there. And you're about to have at some point, hopefully soon, Matheson Park. I mean, Irvington has a lot to work with. You have something that other communities don't have, the Hudson River. And my doctor told me she's going to Paris and the Loire Valley this summer with her family. And I said, well, you know, the Hudson River Valley is said to be analogous to the Loire Valley. And I think that's apropos description.
Apropos of that relationship with Lyndhurst, do you know whether Madam Walker visited Lyndhurst with Helen Gould while she was there, or vice versa? Do you have any knowledge about that?
You know, I've discussed that with Howard and others. And one thing I can say is that Madam and Madam Walker and Madam Talleyrand had the same sort of philosophy about helping women. And, you know, at Lyndhurst, even way back almost 100 years ago, they trained women in various skills, and they trained women of color right along with women, white women, and that speaks to what Madam and hopefully what the villa will be accommodating in the future.
And time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions, because we've gone for quite a while in a great way. But do you know what Richelieu Dennis's general plans are for what he might do with the villa?
Well, as he had stated publicly at the Board of Trustees meeting, that he was going to use the villa as a training ground for female entrepreneur. And he's got the proper entree. He owns Essence Communications, which is a magazine and website company. And I want to, that reminds me that there's going to be very shortly a catwalk, if you will. Dior just did one in Athens from the new era Olympic Theater in Athens. And there will be a catwalk streamed from the villa very shortly. I'm not sure of the exact date, but the first African-American couture designer is doing this catwalk streaming.
So one final question, because I know we're running late, but why did you sell the home?
Well, it's a fair question. We had done what we wanted to do, and it was appropriate at this point to move on. You know, we went from a 20,000 square foot home with a separate carriage house, and we live in a 2,000 square foot plus apartment. I don't have to worry about snow removal, you know, the pool being maintained. The pool in the building is maintained. You get to a certain age and you know it's time to move on. And I had the right buyer who would be in a position to maintain the villa and to promote it in such a way that the Madam C.J. Walker legacy would continue to live.
Barry and Harold, again, I could also listen for more hours, but I think we need to end it here. I think Veronica Gedrich, the president of the Historical Society, wants to just step on for a minute to say thanks to you. Veronica, if you could just unmute yourself as well, that'd be great.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Barry and Ambassador Doley. That was such a terrific program. And thank you all for joining us today. And remember, if you've missed any part of this program or any of our recent programs, they're posted on our beautiful new website, www.irvingtonhistoricalsociety.org.